I never imagined that my husband would turn my world upside down just because I confessed that I didn't love him anymore and wanted a divorce. I expected him to plead, to promise change, to fight for our marriage. Instead, he simply walked away, without hesitation, without a second glance. I never thought he could be so cold, so indifferent to everything we had built together. But perhaps looking back, I was the one who had ruined everything first. Mike and I had been married for 3 years, yet our marriage was never built on love, at least not from my side. I had never been truly happy with him. I had married him for all the wrong reasons, and now I was paying the price. Maybe I was naive to think I could keep up the facade forever. I met Mike through an older friend. From the moment he saw me, it was clear he was smitten. Love at first sight, for him. For me, he was an opportunity. Mike was successful, generous, and capable of providing the life I thought I wanted. My parents encouraged the match, insisting, "Love wasn't the only factor in a successful marriage. You'll grow to love him," they assured me. "Stability, security, and a man who adores you. That's what truly matters." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to wake up one day and suddenly feel something real for Mike. But that day never came. 4 months after meeting, we were married. It all happened so fast. Standing at the altar, I saw a man who worshipped me, while all I felt was doubt. He wasn't my type. Short, bald, and lacking the charm that could make my heart race. But he was kind, devoted. He vowed to take care of me, and he did. Yet soon after our wedding, reality hit me like a tidal wave. Love was essential. Every day felt like a chore. Every moment with Mike a reminder of what was missing. He tried. Oh, how he tried. Expensive gifts, extravagant dates, small, thoughtful gestures. But instead of softening me, they built resentment. I felt trapped, suffocated, and in my desperation, I made the worst mistake of my life. I met Andrew. He was everything Mike wasn't: tall, effortlessly attractive, wild, and full of passion. With him, I felt alive. He was the kind of man I had always dreamed of. But there was a problem. Andrew had nothing. No job, no ambition, no ability to sustain the lifestyle I was accustomed to. Yet, I didn't care. When I was with him, the rest of the world faded away. I began funneling money into Andrew's account, ensuring that when the time came, I wouldn't leave empty-handed. Mike, ever trusting, was oblivious. His work as a realtor kept him busy, constantly traveling. It was the perfect setup, until that night. It was past midnight when the doorbell rang. My heart pounded as I peeked through the peephole. Mike. My blood turned to ice. Before I could react, he shoved past me, his strength catching me off guard. "Where is he?" His voice was sharp, scanning the house like a predator. I tried to play dumb, but it was useless. He stormed upstairs, searching every room while I stood frozen. Meanwhile, Andrew did exactly what we had planned. He ran. I stepped aside, opening the door just in time for him to disappear into the night. By the time Mike returned, his expression was twisted with confusion. "Who the hell was here?" he demanded. Feigning innocence, I met his gaze. "What are you talking about?" He didn't believe me. Not entirely, but I knew him well enough. Mike wasn't confrontational. He would push his doubts aside, at least for now. For a while, I tried to stay away from Andrew, convincing myself to fix my marriage. But temptation was stronger than guilt. I fell back into Andrew's arms, but this time, he was impatient. "How long are we going to sneak around like this?" he asked one evening. I stiffened. "Andrew, we've talked about this." "No." "You keep avoiding it," he snapped. "Either you leave him, or I walk away." Panic surged through me. If Andrew knew about the prenup, knew that I wouldn't get a dime from the divorce, would he still be so eager for me to leave Mike? I doubted it. But still, I made my decision. I would divorce Mike. The moment finally came. Mike had just returned from a business trip, exhausted but composed. I stood before him, my hands clenched at my sides. "Mike," I said. He looked up. "Yeah?" A deep breath. "I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce." For a moment, silence. I braced myself for the explosion, for anger, for heartbreak. But to my shock, Mike smirked. A cold, knowing smirk that sent a chill down my spine. Then, without a word, he looked back at his phone. The next morning, confusion turned into horror. A knock at the door. A well-dressed man with a briefcase. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed me an envelope. "These are for you. Divorce papers." I stood frozen, my vision blurring. This couldn't be happening. Was this some kind of cruel joke? Then the front door opened. Mike walked in, calm as ever, takeout coffee in hand. Without a glance in my direction, he headed straight to our bedroom. Heart hammering, I followed, only to find him tossing my clothes onto the floor. Panic seized me. "Mike, what are you doing?" He didn't pause. My dresses, shoes, bags, everything landed in a pile at my feet. Desperate, I grabbed his arm. "Mike, please, let's talk about this." He finally turned to me, his gaze unreadable, but his voice like ice. "Talk?" he repeated, his lips curling into a bitter smirk. "Now you want to talk?" I swallowed hard. No. He cut me off, stepping closer. "I was going to beg you to stay. I was going to fight for us." My breath hitched. "Mike!" But then I realized, he continued, voice dangerously soft. "You were never mine to begin with." He picked up the divorce papers from where I had dropped them and pressed them into my hands. "You wanted to leave?" His lips curved into a smirk that wasn't amusement. It was finality. "Then go." My world collapsed in that moment. I had spent years convincing myself that I held the power in our marriage, that I was in control. But standing there, staring into the eyes of the man I had betrayed, I finally understood. He had been playing the long game, and I had just lost. Mike let out a low, bitter laugh, shaking his head as he pried my fingers off his sleeve, as though my touch repulsed him. "You don't want a divorce?" he repeated mockingly. "That's funny, because I've been waiting for the perfect moment to get rid of you." My stomach dropped. "What?" He stepped closer, his gaze cold, piercing. "Do you really think I didn't know? That you were outsmarting me? That I was some clueless fool you could play?" His voice was steady, terrifying. I shook my head frantically. "Mike, I don't know what you're talking about." He cut me off with a sharp glare. "I know everything, Kelly. Every single thing. I had my suspicions for a while. I just needed proof. Thanks to some very helpful people, I got exactly what I needed." My knees weakened. "Mike, please just listen to me." "Shut up." His words hit like a slap. "Remember that day I came home unannounced?" I froze. He smirked. "I didn't just randomly decide to come back early. Our neighbor tipped me off. Told me you had a habit of entertaining a certain guest whenever I was away." My lips parted, but no words came out. I pretended to leave on a business trip but stayed in a hotel nearby. The moment I got the call that your guest had arrived, I knew I had you. His voice was eerily calm. I didn't catch him red-handed, but I didn't need to. The moment I stepped into our bedroom and saw the 2 half-filled wine glasses, I knew. Then I found something even better. Cheap, disgusting male underwear in our bathroom. My stomach churned. I felt sick. He stepped even closer, eyes filled with disgust and triumph. I was never going to beg you to stay, Kelly. Never going to cry for you. You thought I'd be the one devastated? The one on my knees, pleading for you to stay? He let out a dark chuckle. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. His smirk widened. I've been planning this for a long time. My hands shook as I gripped the pen, staring at the divorce papers in front of me. My mind screamed at me to fight, to beg, to do anything but sign them. But then I looked at Mike, standing across from me, arms crossed, lips curled into a cruel smirk. There was no amusement in his eyes, only cold satisfaction. "You don't have a choice, Kelly," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Either you sign those papers, or I'll make sure everyone sees exactly what kind of woman you are." My stomach clenched. The videos, the secret footage he had of me and Andrew, taken without my knowledge. The thought of them being exposed made nausea rise in my throat. Swallowing hard, I forced my trembling fingers to move and sign my name on the dotted line. The moment the ink dried, something inside me shattered. Mike let out a slow, satisfied exhale. He picked up the papers, glanced at my signature, then met my gaze with a look that sent ice through my veins. "Good girl," he mocked, tucking the papers away. Then his smirk faded, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "But don't think this is over. You may be out of my house, but I'm going to make sure your life is a living hell. You have no idea what's coming for you." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, but I refused to let him see me break. Without another word, I picked up my bags, straightened my back, and walked out of the home that was no longer mine. I barely registered the cab ride to my parents' house. My mind spun, replaying everything. When I finally arrived, I hesitated before knocking. I hadn't told them I was coming. I had no idea how they would react. The door swung open, revealing my mother's shocked face. "Kelly?" she gasped, eyes wide as she took in my disheveled appearance and the suitcase in my hand. Before I could speak, my father appeared behind her, his brows furrowed. "What happened?" I let out a shaky breath and stepped inside, dragging my suitcase behind me. The moment the door closed, I spilled everything. Mike's discovery, his humiliation, his threats, his blackmail. By the time I finished, the room was thick with silence. My parents just stared, their faces a mixture of shock, disappointment, and something worse, disgust. My mother exhaled shakily. "Kelly, how could you?" Shame rose like bile in my throat. I don't know," I murmured, barely above a whisper. "You don't know?" My father's voice was sharp, like a blade. "You humiliated your husband, embarrassed this family, and you have the audacity to say you don't know?" I clenched my fists, my face heating up. "Dad, please. I know I made a mistake, but..." "A mistake?" He laughed bitterly. "Kelly, this isn't some small mistake. This is a disgrace. Do you have any idea what you've done to our reputation? To ours?" My mother covered her face with her hands. "What will people say? What will our friends think?" Anger and frustration twisted inside me. They weren't upset that I was hurting. They only cared about how it made them look. "You need to go back to Mike and beg for his forgiveness," my father said suddenly. I snapped my head up. "What?" "Yes." My mother nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "You need to fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated in disbelief. "Are you serious? Mike hates me. He wants to ruin me. There's nothing to fix." "Then make him change his mind," my father snapped. "Plead if you have to, but you will go back." Rage exploded in my chest. I had spent years bending to their will, but not anymore. I never even loved Mike, I spat. And maybe divorcing him is the best thing that ever happened to me. My father's face turned red with fury. You ungrateful little... His hand flew across my face. The sting burned as my head snapped to the side. Tears blurred my vision. I touched my cheek, shaking. You never cared about my happiness, I hissed. You only cared about what you could gain from this marriage. Enough, my mother cried. You will pack your bags and we will take you back to Mike. I let out a bitter laugh. No, I'm not going back. Yes, you are, my father roared. Do you think we raised you to be a disgrace? I straightened my back, lifting my chin. I'm done listening to you. You forced me into this marriage. And look where it got me. I won't let you control me anymore. Their faces twisted in anger, but I didn't care. I grabbed my bag, turned, and stormed toward the neon door. I'm not going back. Then, without another look, I walked out on them. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. Does he still live here? I asked, my voice tight with hope. The woman at the door shook her head. Oh no. Mike sold this house months ago. We're the new owners. I froze. He was gone. Just like that. My breath hitched. Do you know where he moved? She shrugged. Another city, I think. Desperation clawed at me. I dialed his old number. Nothing. Again. And again. Silence. He had vanished, slipping through my fingers like sand. I had one last option, his parents' house. If anyone knew where he was, it was them. But when Mrs. Thompson opened the door, her face hardened instantly. You have some nerve showing up here, she snapped. Her voice dripped with venom. Please, I just need to talk to him. Why? So you can ruin his life again? She scoffed. He finally escaped you. And now you come crawling back? Tears burned my eyes. I just want to apologize. She let out a bitter laugh. Apologize? Her lips curled. You destroyed him. Do you know what you put him through? She shook her head, disgusted. He's better off without you. She slammed the door in my face. My last hope. Shattered. But I wasn't done. I found James, Mike's old friend. Please, I begged. Just give me his number. James sighed, hesitating. Then, reluctantly, he scribbled it down. Don't expect a warm welcome. I called. Again. And again. No answer. Desperation turned to recklessness. I drove straight to his new address, heart pounding with every mile. When I finally arrived, the sight of his mansion made my stomach churn. Rang the doorbell, rehearsing my words. But when the door opened, my world stopped. She was beautiful, effortless, poised. And then she said it. I'm his girlfriend. The ground beneath me vanished. A car pulled up, and I turned just as Mike stepped out. The moment he saw me, his expression twisted into fury. How the hell did you find me? His voice was sharp, cutting. Mike, please, Enough. He stepped forward, towering over me. You think an apology can fix the past? You think I want to hear anything from you? His voice was ice. I will never forgive you. Never. Now leave. The door slammed. I stood there, numb. My heart shattered. 6 months. That's all it took for him to erase me, to replace me. And worst of all, she was pregnant. I spent every day drowning in regret, clinging to hope. But he had already built a new life, one where I no longer existed. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he never truly loved me. Because if he had, he wouldn't have moved on so fast. And that realization hurt more than losing him ever did. That was my story, my reality. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.